all you have to do is visit our house once or twice, walk into our kids' playroom, and realize that as they demand, we supply. You've heard that before, huh? Maybe you know that from your own life. That as they demand, we supply. If you walked into that 100 square foot room and saw that 200 square foot number of toys, you might realize that it's getting out of hand. And as I look around that 200 square feet of stuff, I begin to think this is a little bit like voodoo economics. This is a little voodoo going on. If you know anything about voodoo economics, you know that was the phrase that George Bush 41 used when referencing Reaganomics or Ronald Reagan's economic policies. That it's all about supply side economics. Create more jobs, supply goes up, demand increases, the economy gets bigger. So supply and demand. As I look around my kids' playroom, I think this supply has gotten out of hand. And I'm saddened. I'm saddened because I think about the kids that don't have any toys in their playroom. Kids that don't have a playroom at all. I think about the overindulgence of my parents and Kelly's parents and Kelly and I. But as I look around, I think, what's the kingdom principle here? Because you can always find one if you look hard enough. And so I look, and I say to myself, did you know that God's supply is limitless? His supply is limitless. All we have to do is demand. All we have to do is demand, and that's no voodoo. But what is our economic theory of the kingdom of God? Now I'm going back to seminary here, so get ready. If you examine the word economics, and you break it down to the two Greek words it forms, you've got oikos and nomos. The law of the household. Economics, the law of the household. And then I think to myself, what are the commandments of the law of your household, of my household? What are the commandments that we live by? What is the law that governs our life together? Our justice, mercy, compassion, are those the currencies that we use in our economies? And I wonder, how well do we make our households a market share in God's kingdom? Kelly makes many visits with Child Protective Services. She contracts with them. And so she goes to the homes and she does a review of all of their home to make sure it's a safe place. And she interviews potential caretakers. All of these children come from broken situations, of course. Families are in an abuse cycle, substance abuse or physical abuse, arrest records, lots and lots of sad stories. And often Kelly comes home just emotionally exhausted, as you can imagine. But recently she came home and she was hopeful. She had a smile on her face and she couldn't wait to share the story with me about what had happened. There was this little boy who his only parent had died. No, excuse me, not died. She'd been taken off to prison because of a substance abuse issue. And this was the only family this little boy had. And so he was going to be put into the system. Well, there's this nice, faithful Southern Baptist family right down the street from the home. And they knew the situation of their neighbors. Strangely enough, in this age, they actually knew what was going on next door. And they said, we're going to take that child in. We want to be the foster parents of that child. We can't just stand by and do nothing. It's amazing. You don't hear a story like that very often. And it brought hope to Kelly. It brought excitement to Kelly because it meant that someone was investing in the economic policies of the kingdom, not worrying about the bottom line so much because it's going to cost money. But that doesn't matter as much because We want to have a life worth living. We want to have a world worth living in. So the story before us this morning is one we've all heard before, I'm sure. The miraculous feeding of the 5,000 with 2 loaves and 5 fish. Jesus has great compassion on the thousands who have come to see Him. People that have come to place a demand on Jesus because they know that His supply is limitless. These are people from situations of scarcity, people that need healing, people that need compassion, people that need just a little glimmer of hope, and they come to the one place where they think they may find it. They gather at Jesus' feet. Friends and enemies together, sick, tired, hungry, they come to Jesus because they know that their households are doomed without hearing something about Jesus' new economic policies. With their presence, just like that couple down the street, they recklessly place a demand on Christ, having full faith and certainty that His supply is limitless. But the disciples urge Jesus, send them away, we don't have anything for them to eat. Now, just sitting there just now, I thought, I've asked not just my kids, but other kids too, to be fair. Why don't you give some of those toys away to somebody that needs them? Oh, I don't have enough toys to give away. I don't have enough toys to give away. I need my toys. We need this bread. We need this fish. We don't have enough to share. And so Jesus takes them back to school again. These 12 hard-headed disciples. He takes them back to school because He knows that where justice, mercy is found, salvation is found as well. That even in the scarcity of the loaves and fishes, there are going to be abundant leftovers. That's the economy of the kingdom, that even when you think that you have nothing at all, you have everything you need. That's the way to run a household. Knowing that God in His merciful compassion will supply for every demand brought to Him in faith according to His righteous and holy will. But come on, you might say, Rob, what is that righteous and holy will? Stop drawing pictures in the sand and giving us churchy words. What is that will? What is the outline of His economic policies that you keep talking about? Well, of course, it's right there in the pew with you. It's right in front of you. The Holy Scriptures, the Old and the New. And it stands right there, that altar and the cross, the symbols that we use to show God's sacrifice and His mercy, His love, His justice, and His compassion. These are the things that we live by. These are the things that define the law of God's household. He wants us to be a people that are holy, a people set apart. God came down from His exalted throne to live here in the muck and the mire with us, that in becoming like man, we might become more like God, and that our households might be a dim reflection of His household. I'm not talking about the prosperity gospel here today, by the way. You hear about the prosperity gospel a lot. I'm not saying that you give just enough money or just enough prayer to this mission or that preacher or that preacher, you're going to be driving a Lexus by the end of the week. I'm saying that when you offer the prayer that is perfect in the sight of God, a contrite and broken heart, when you break your heart and lay it upon the altar of God and pour out all your vexations, your vices, all those things that separate you from the love of God, when you lay those upon the altar, when you enter into the economy of God's kingdom and not worry so much about your economy, our economy, God will bless it. And He will provide abundantly. God proved the viability of His economic plan because they tried to trick Him and corrupt Him, but He wouldn't be moved. They laughed at Him and beat Him and mocked Him, but He wasn't ashamed. They whipped Him, beat Him, broke Him. They tortured Him and tormented Him, but they couldn't persuade Him. They strung Him up on a tree and killed Him, but death couldn't hold Him. They buried Him in the grave, but the grave could not contain Him. That's the economics of the kingdom. That's the economics of Jesus Christ that we follow, and that's the economics that God calls us to embrace with our wills and with our lives. That even in scarcity of stuff or spirit, God can bring about gain. That even when abundance just seems out of reach, He can supply. That even when we live in a world of hatred and pain and violence and death, life can sprout forth. And life so abundant that it will exceed our demands richly. Do you believe that? Do you believe that? That God's compassion can cast out all fear? Do you believe that? Do you believe that the economy of the kingdom is what we should be striving for as Christians? To live in that economy and bring that economy more so into this world that we live in. Do you believe that we should not worship our things, but the Maker of all things? We need to get our priorities straight. I'm saying, do you believe that? Because it's no voodoo. It's no voodoo at all. The currency we need to be using is compassion and love. Because if we did, it would change this church, it would change this nation that we live in, it would change the world. If we just tried it once. If we just tried it twice. If we put ourselves in the line and offered all that we are and all that we have and all that we shall become, and made our currency not so much about dollars and cents, but about love, compassion, mercy, and justice. Do you believe that He can feed the 5,000? He can feed the entire world with His body and blood. Do you believe that even if we go down to the grave in the darkness, He will reach down and grab us, because where He is, He wants us to be also. That's the economics of the kingdom. That's the economics of the kingdom. That if we lay all that we are and all that we have upon the altar that is His Son, Jesus Christ, we will receive a life worth living. That's no voodoo. That's what it's like to live in the household of the God who made you, redeemed you, and desperately desires to save you. It's the only way, it's the only truth, and it's the only life. So in this Thanksgiving season, let's look at our playgrounds and decide where our economics lie, where our care and concern lies. Let's think about the demands we're placing. Let's think about the supply that we are investing in this Thanksgiving season. Let us try to honor God just a little bit more by engaging in the currency of compassion and justice. Because at some point, all of us have to choose. And I pray we choose wisely.